Hello and welcome to Archvelder's Hacks with Archvelder and his amazing hacks. So this gold making method will blow your mind. In principle, it makes no sense whatsoever until you know exactly how it works. We are going to be making gold from an activity which has never in Warcraft's history made any significant gold, player versus player combat. But we're not going to be actually doing very much player versus player combat, or at least we don't have to. Let me explain. You see, in the past, people who did PvP got a currency called Honor, which they gave you buckets of all the time for doing virtually nothing, and was generally speaking completely useless a few weeks into a patch. In this expansion, The War Within, Blizzard changed all that by allowing you to purchase actual things of value, which can be sold for gold on the auction house. In particular, the item Vicious Bloodstone currently sells for around 7,000 gold and costs only 2,500 honor points. This is part of a component which allows you to put gem sockets on your gear and sells literally instantly, as you can see here, when you put it on the auction house. There are additionally plans, patterns and schematics which can sell for more gold but can take a little longer to sell. These cost 7,500 honor, so mathematically speaking it is worth buying a plan or whatever if it can be sold for more than 3 times the price of a bloodstone. Bloodstones are the same price on every realm. Plans and recipes etc. are not. You can get much better prices for the items you buy by using your warband to send items and gold between realms when an item is selling for more on another realm. In addition, you may want to factor in the fact that plans etc. tend to take a little longer to sell, usually a few days in my experience. So how do we acquire these without doing much or possibly even any player versus player combat? And how do we grind as much honor as possible to make as much gold as possible? Basically, we are going to be stacking PvP quests upon PvP quests upon hidden features to get honor while we are making honor on our honor on our honor. By the way, these videos are sponsored by massive evil corporations. Well, actually, no, they're not. Massive evil corporations just aren't interested in giving me money. However, this video is sponsored by my Patreon, which contains one of the largest archives of PvP and gold making exploits in existence. So, the obvious place to start is with Rufius in Dornagal. He will have a number of quests. These vary, but there will always be a number to do with instanced PvP and one to do with world PvP, which will have sparks in the title. Now, if you don't like PvP, you will be interested in the quests Preserving in War, which requires you to earn a certain amount of honor in epic battlegrounds, Preserving Solo Shuffle, which requires you to earn honor in Solo Shuffle, and the Sparks of War quest. These quests can be done with little or literally no PvP combat. Now, every day, your first random battleground, epic battleground win, arena skirmish win, and brawl award bonus honor. Also, you can do rated solo shuffle and rated solo battlegrounds. Now, the basic rule with these is that the more players in a battleground, the less your individual impact. If you are very inexperienced at PvP and do not enjoy it, then you will want to do only the epic player versus player battlegrounds. If you enjoy PvP and are reasonably well geared and also have a reasonable understanding of it, then do everything. We'll cover epic battlegrounds first, as these are generally the best source of honor early on. Crucially, 2 of these, Wintergrasp and Ashran, have hidden and important mini-quests. These hidden quests can be completed very quickly and award collectively 2,000 honor. almost enough for a bloodstone simply by themselves. When you add in the honour you get from competing in, not to mention actually winning the Battleground, you can appreciate the gold making returns from these are actually better than most things. Unfortunately, they can only be done once per season, multiplied by the number of characters you have, but do make sure you complete these quests every time you hit max level on a toon. It is essentially free gold. We'll cover the Ashran quest first because it doesn't require any fighting at all. You must find 50 artifact fragments to complete this quest and gain 1,000 honour. Most people do this by killing monsters within Ashran. There's a much faster way. You see these tree stumps scattered around? Just loot them. This is how fast you can complete the quest. You'll need to turn the quest in to the quest giver here. Now there's a small additional touch you can do to gain an extra little honour here. If you go to this quest giver here, you can turn in the artifact fragments you've earned. They aren't actually consumed when you turn in the 50 fragments quest. You'll get a small additional amount of honour from this. The Wintergrasp quest simply requires you to win the Battle of Wintergrasp. You can determine whether your team is going to win in basically a minute. Whoever wins the initial battle at Sunken will almost certainly win the Battleground. If you don't win the initial conflict, leave and do something else. Queue again later. You then want to do the World PvP quest. You'll need to open the pre-made group finder and queue for a group with Sparks in the title and fly to the relevant location. Now, almost everyone does this wrong. You simply want to tag as many players as possible from as far away as possible. You don't want to get involved in the fighting. You simply want to do minor damage, probably using area of effect spells, to as many players as possible, or alternatively, if you're playing a healing class, heal players involved in the combat on your team. Here's a trick which works extremely well for ranged players. Some physical objects like tree branches are difficult to land on. More or less everyone is using dynamic flight these days, and it is almost impossible to land on a precise point like this using dynamic flight. However, when you die, you get a ghost mount, which uses old school traditional flying, which, while it is much slower than dynamic flight, is so much better for landing on small areas. This means you can access raised areas that other players simply can't get to, and so they can't knock you off or attack you, allowing you to tag dozens of players at will every few seconds. So to summarise, find a weird, almost inaccessible raise point somewhere above where fighting is taking place, get yourself killed nearby, and then ghost fly to this location and res. So far as I can tell, this isn't an exploit, it is just a creative use of game mechanics. Though it is as powerful and game-breaking as many actual exploits. Now finally, there's the rated solo shuffle quest. You don't actually have to do anything for this. You can just basically AFK through the 12 rounds that are required for completion. At the moment I wrote this, the quest is actually glitched and is counting towards arena skirmishes, but normally you simply have to complete 12 rounds of solo shuffle, and there are no other criteria. That's basically it for players who just don't want to do player versus player combat or have very limited time. Just pick up the low-hanging fruit. Now, the one exception is the Comp Stomp Brawl, which comes around every few months or so. Comp Stomp is basically player versus environment. It's basically a dungeon in a battleground style. You fight only against computer players. They are very easy to beat. It usually only takes minutes per brawl. This will be a stupid way to make honour the next time it happens. A lot of smart players just drop everything and do it for the full week. Now, this and all other PvP brawls each week have a quest called Something Different, which auto-completes every time you win the first brawl of the week. It can then be turned in Dawn of Gold. It can be tough trying to win this one if you're under-geared and queuing into pucks, so you might want to give it a miss. It is a nice chunk of extra honour though. Those who don't normally do PvP should be taking the essentially free gold on offer here. You can make a ton of gold in an hour just stacking all these quests, though you'll need average luck with the teams you queue into in terms of the number of wins you get and the length of the battles. Now, if you do enjoy player versus player combat, you can basically earn quite a high rate of gold just doing the best stuff each day. If you are thinking you need to be shit hot at PvP to do this, you are very much mistaken. In fact, being really good at PvP in the traditional sense of being good at arena will actually work against you here. Here's why. The strategy involved for this is very different from that of a top arena player. Honor comes from honorable kills. That's when you contribute to a kill in any way. You can do minor damage to a target killed by others, or heal others who do all the damage to a kill. It doesn't matter, you'll still be credited with the honourable kill. Most PvPers are trying to get killing blows, which don't matter for the purposes of acquiring honour and therefore gold. For gold making purposes, you just want to tag as many players as possible. Now this point is really important to understand. When you queue into any form of team-based player versus player combat, there is a strong relationship between one game and the next, because the same pool of players tend to re-queue with you. If you win a Battleground, queue again the instant you get out. You may well get the same strong group of players. If you lose, go and do something else for a short period in order to randomise the group that you will subsequently queue into. Sometimes, particularly when it seems like there aren't enough healers queuing for a specific faction, or you keep encountering the same pre-made, it is best just to leave the game for an extended period. Queue with the opposite faction alternatively in mercenary mode, or do arena skirmishes and solo shuffle. Now, here's an advanced strategy for rated solo shuffle and battlegrounds. You don't have to do this, but you'll be able to earn more honour faster and for longer periods if you do. At the start of these, you're put into a pool of characters who have not played this type of battleground before. Your rating is 0. Some of these people will be skilled players who are using alts, but some will just be inexperienced or not that good. A simple trick here is to switch between your specializations whenever you begin to gain rating. When you change specializations, your rating goes back to 0. Your rating is specific to your specialization. This makes it much easier to win. Of course, you have to play with a specialization less familiar to you, but for me there's not much difference between playing, say, Arms and Fury Warrior or Frost and Fire as Mage. A useful but important tip here. It takes 1 minute and 30 seconds for a battleground queue to pop and then vanish. You don't really want to be wasting most of that time in the starting area, so to make this efficient, queue towards the end of that period. So, how much are you going to make from doing this? Well, I have made upwards of 80,000 gold in an hour. And overall I'm up well over 1 million gold. But that's not terribly realistic most of the time unless you are stacking multiple quests or have multiple teams queuing into excellent groups and doing everything right. And the more you do it on a given day, the less the returns will be. Without daily bonus honour from initial quests, the earnings fall right off. This is a very opportunistic strategy. You need to recognise when the time is right to do this, because when the time is right, you can make a lot of gold very fast. Finally, and obviously, use any items which increase your honour gains, such as your guild battle standard, or new to this expansion, the Vicious Flask of Honour. You can take this strategy so much further with the use of player versus player exploits. Blizzard seemed to stop caring about this years ago. A surprising amount of stuff I published on YouTube is actually still working. The most comprehensive list of PvP exploits anywhere by some distance is on my Patreon. These can vary from knowing where to jump on a rock to get out of range of melee players, a surprisingly effective strategy, to porting entire teams into inescapable areas, or even disconnecting them for the very hardcore.